How you going, guys? Today we're installing a dual cooler kit on the 200 Series Landcruiser. Let's get started. And we need to take this trim off. It's held on with 7 of these clips that you just have to push. Once they're pushed, they can be released and lifted up, just like so. To reset them, you push the underside of them like that. Once they're back in the inside, you can actually just push them level, and then that's locked in. Be removed. Next part is there's 3 10mm head screws. This vehicle is missing the middle one. Try to only use a hand tool on these because they will just strip out the plastic that they screw into. Now the next step, there's little clips underneath the side bolts. It's very hard to show to the camera. I'll show you when I've got the grille removed. So this is the clip here that I removed. So you push it to the side, and then the grille actually comes off this clip. To remove the clip out of the headlight, you just turn it like so, and then you have to reinstall it into the grille to clip it back in. And that just slides in like that. Now that's reset to be refitted. Now this is the dual cooler kit. Before I fit any hoses to it, I like to fit it to the car to make sure that everything's out of the way that I need. Once I know that it can fit, I fit the link hose that goes from usually the top of one to the bottom of the other. Now these brackets are actually multi-directional as well. You've got they come pre-assembled with the barbs fitting while pointing to the passenger side, but you can remove them off the bracket and remount them to be pointing downwards. It just depends on if you've got a winch in the way, so that's why we generally point it to the left. All right, the next step is we've got to remove the horn. The bracket bolt takes the spot of the horn bolt. We keep this bolt though. There's also this bracket here. There's a 10mm bolt at the bottom. We'll also be removing that bolt. The bracket bolts onto those 2 locations. There's also a location over here that we supply another bracket to it as well. So we bolt it to there, there, and down that way. Now in this kit, normally, with the horn, I've unplugged it off this one, but in the kit normally, you just flip it and bolt it on with the cooler bracket. I'm going to have to remount this one elsewhere due to all the accessory wiring that's holding behind it. Now we're going for a test fit now. And it looks like this cooler bracket will fit. Fit the link hose on the bench. All right, in the kit you'll get a package with all the accessories that you need like that. You get your 3.5 meter length of hose and your 0.5 meter length to link the coolers together. I'll get a couple of clamps out. Now I try to think ahead on how You don't want to make the clamp in a position that you can't get to it later on once it's fitted to the car. So if I fitted it downwards, to gain access to that, you would have to pull all the underneath bash plates off. If I face it upwards, you may be able to get to it with a long screwdriver or some extensions on a 7mm little socket. So on this one, I'll point it up on the bottom barb, which is going on the back. Now, if these hoses can be a little bit stubborn to fit on the barbs, if they are just a little bit of transmission oil or a Vaseline or a rubber grease. You want these clamps to be pretty firm to make sure you can't turn the hose. Fit the hose on the top cooler. Now we'll see how we go with fitting. Sometimes you have to trim this hose just down a little bit, just to make the loop a little bit of a shorter loop. See how it goes. All right, depending on the year of 200 series you have, we've got 3 different brackets. These brackets are all, they change the front rad support a little bit. There are different heights and also different shapes. So we've got a non-DPF, and then there's also a different style of non-DPF, and then a DPF one. They're just different heights and different shape. Won't know until I've got this bolted on, so we'll just go see if it fits on now. All right, another little test fit with the hose at this length, which, due to the extra wiring, it's going to be in the way. But what I might actually do, I'll fit this in position now, and then we'll undo the hose, route it around the loom. Now that we're around the loom, we can prevent kinking of the hose. Now that's going to work. I'm just going to pop this back up again. I'm going to get the big length of hose and fit it on now. All right, we've got the hose fitted to the coolers. I'm going to lift the cooler back up. We'll drop the cooler hose down to where, like, basically on top of the bash plate. We'll lift the vehicle up in the air, and then we'll remove the bash plate, and then we can start routing the hose where it needs to go. I'm just going to refit the top bolt just loosely for the moment. Now that the cooler is basically in place, we'll put it back up in the air and take the bash plate off, and then we'll start routing the hose. All right, next step, we're going to take this bash plate off and possibly this panel as well. Depending on what bull bar system you have, or even no bull bar at all, this panel may actually come a little bit further forward. But yeah, it just depends on the vehicle. On this panel there is 6 bolts. 1, 2, 3, and there's one up there, 5 and 6. Now that we've got that bash plate off, we'll take this one off as well. All right, now that we've got all the bash plates off, we can gain access to the hose that we've dropped down. We can start routing the hose. It actually gains a lot of access for the bottom bolt of the cooler bracket as well, so you can actually chuck that bolt in as well. Chuck that bolt in now. And that bolt is one of the bolts out of the kit that we supply. All right, now that we've got that bolt in, we can start routing the hose. Make sure you've got enough loop so you're not kinking the hose at the top. Now I'm probably just going to follow this bar here. You can also just cable tie the hose to this support here as well, with the cable ties that we supply in the kit. Keep the cable ties loose for the moment, just so you can tighten them up later and get all the routing nice and neat. And the next part of the routing, we're going to remove this. It's a foam block. It's stuck to the panel above it, just with double-sided tape. Just like so. That gains us room so we can route our hose to behind the radiator. So we've had the hose through where the foam block was from the front, coming through on top of the chassis rail. Right now this is poking out on the driver's side chassis rail. I'm going to start feeding it back through that direction, which will be behind the radiator, and it'll start dropping down here. Now that we've got the hose down into the location that we link into the system, we can start. There's a hose that we remove that links the original cooler back down to the transmission. We interrupt it from the standard cooler. We go through our coolers then, and then back to the transmission. So we're going to remove this hose here. The transmission cooler hose that one is the return, so that's the one we're going to remove. Just with some pliers. Now this hose is just over 1/2 metre long, and it heads up towards the driver's side battery location. On this one I'm going to have to remove the battery to gain access to the other end of this hose. But right now we'll remove this hose here. It will start draining out the oil that's in the cooler line. I just have a drain tin underneath it. Now that we're at this point, we can drop the car back down, gain access to the other side of this, which is on the driver's side of the radiator. All right, next step, we're gonna have to remove the battery on the driver's side. So Firstly, we'll have to disconnect both batteries. Remove the negatives first. So now that the negatives are off, we can pull the positives off. Right, we've got both terminals off, and then we can start taking the bracket off and then pull the battery out. Right, so we'll be removing the bottom hose, and it's actually good that they actually put a little blue dot. That actually says that that's the cold line. So we'll be removing that hose altogether. It is got a hose retainer halfway down that we'll have to unclip as well to completely remove the hose. Remove the clamp. Little twist sometimes to release the hose, and then just slide it back. Like so. I just have to remove the retaining clamp that clamps onto the radiator shroud. So that's the white clip there. Once I remove the hose, we'll be able to demonstrate how that gets removed. That's the hose there. Now that clamp, it's got a little tooth, and if you open up that with a screwdriver, it will just open up like that. Right, now that hose is removed from the vehicle, we'll go back up. We'll cut the hose to length to fit the hose on the pipe that heads back to the transmission, and then we'll feed the other hose up towards that fitting there. Right, now we can trim the hose to fit onto the pipe that heads back to the transmission. I just ran it up beside it, marked where I reckon it should be. I'll just feed it back out, like so. Now you can cut it with pipe cutters or a large wire cutters. Stanley knife can do it as well, but obviously that's a lot more dangerous. Just like so. Now one of the hoses is shorter and the other one is longer, so we can feed that back up. Fit the new clamp onto the hose and just slide it over the pipe. Now if it is a little bit firm, you can put a little bit of transmission oil, Vaseline or rubber grease. Make sure you pass the barb on the pipe as well. And we can feed the other hose up to the top. And now we'll lower the vehicle back down and fit the other hose. All right, so this is the hose that we've fed up. You can pull it all the way up now. And at this point, this is where I like to, you can actually refit it to the retainer on the rad support, onto the rad shroud, I should say. Now that that's clicked in there, we can trim this hose to fit about there. All right, pull back the conduit a little bit, fit the hose clamp. Make sure you've orientated it way the easiest to tighten it. Now that that's tight, we can refit the conduit. Now that that's all done, we can refit the battery and hook up the batteries again. Batteries are tight. All right, this is where we use the one of the three different brackets. So we've got the non-DPF, the DPF model, which this isn't a DPF model. So it's between these two. Some of these frames are a different shape. So you'll need this one, but on this type of vehicle, it needs this bracket. So this bracket goes underneath this panel and bolts onto these two bolts here. We're putting a bolt through this hole here, and then also these two here. This bracket will be going underneath this panel. Make sure that you haven't got any other wiring underneath the panel that you might end up crushing. Have your 3 bolts ready. Now in our kit we supply 3 gold bolts. I like to put one of those gold bolts onto the bottom of the bracket, and I reuse the bolt that goes on the bottom of the bracket in this position here. Get all the bolts started before you go on tightening them. Now they're all started, we can tighten them up. All right, so the only bolt that we got left to tighten is at the top of the bracket. I'm going to remove this top bolt again. I need to refit the horn. Now, due to all the wiring, I actually thought I wouldn't be able to fit this horn. Now the cooler bracket is all tight. I'm going to chuck another cable tie at the top here to link the hoses together. I'm just going to fit another cable tie here. Next we'll refit the grille. We're just going to line up those clips and clip it in. Just nip these up hand tight. They don't need to be any tighter. And we'll get the cover tray. Now these trays slide in from the back. And to refit these, because they got four teeth, sometimes you have to just turn them in. If you just force them in, they can just break because they're very brittle. Shut the bonnet. Now that part we'll lift it back up and refit the bash plates underneath the bull bar. Now that everything's bolted up nice and firm, we can tighten these cable ties. Cut off the tails, and we're ready to refit the bash plate. All right, now we're going to start the vehicle after having done everything else for the cooler kit. We're going to start it, pull the check plug out, and then start filling it from the fill port that's on the side of the transmission here. It will generally take 1.5 to 2 litres after the cooler's been added to the system. Right, now we'll just drop it down and start it. Right, now that we've got it started, pull the fill plug out. Remove the check plug. And start filling. And when it's just running out like that, that's when I usually just put the plug in. Refit the fill plug. The filler plug is a 24mm plug. The torque spec on the filler plug is 40 Newton meters. And it's going to torque up the check plug to 20 Newton meters, or 180 inch-pounds. Now we're good to lower it down and go for a road test. And that's how you install the dual cooler kit for the Toyota Landcruiser 200 series. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.